Hi, everyone. It's Jason Sansucci with Do You Know Drones. Welcome back for another Innovator interview with another amazing guest that I'm very lucky to have. And let me go ahead and just pull her up now. Welcome to the stage, Jes Chosid, CEO of Rainmaker. We're here to talk about Rainmaker, talk about Jes, and we're also here to talk about their brand new product called Nixie.
Hey, thanks, Jason. My name is Jes Chosid, CEO of Rainmaker. Thank you for that introduction. And we're very excited about Nixie that was just dropped this week.
Now, is that a pun? I feel like there's a pun there.
You might be. You can't get away from them in this industry, can you?
I like it. No, it's good. And it was funny, we were chatting just before. There seems to be an interesting trend going on right now in the drone industry for hanging things underneath a drone. I'll just give you a few examples. Last guest, Ager Technologies, the agriculture probe that's hanging underneath for automated crop scouting. We have drone deliveries. We have Juniper itself, my day job. We do a lot of slung loads, magnetometer work. Hanging things underneath the drone seems to be a pretty popular thing right now. Jes, I want to hear from you. What is the inspiration behind Nixie?
Yeah, so it was a long time coming, actually. So we've been working a lot in water projects and been working a lot with the New York City Department of Environmental Protection and a lot of water engineering companies. And along the way, you learn things, you make relationships, and we started understanding what a big problem water sampling was and keeping up with all the regulations, the Clean Water Act. And we saw how much physical just labor and bodies you needed to physically go out and collect the water samples. And New York City is a monster in the world of water utilities. They're the largest water utility in the United States, and they collect more water samples than any utility in the United States. And so it was a great test bed for us, basically. And Boston and California are huge markets as well, but nothing touches New York City. And because the water, let's see, there's, I believe, the DEP manages water for 9 million people. So basically, I was overhearing a conversation between a deputy commissioner and an engineer talking about what a logistical nightmare and how complicated it was to collect all these water samples every year. And I was working on a job for the DEP, but completely eavesdropping. And I just turned my body and I said, hey, if we made something that can hang off a drone to collect the water samples, would you be interested? And he said, yeah. So that's how it started. It was literally just like listening in. And that's, the importance of listening, right? So we started working on it and we demoed an early iteration of it, which was made of metal a couple years ago. And it worked very well, but it was clunky. It didn't look so pretty. And, so we had it as one of our many projects, one of our many side projects. And then when COVID hit and a lot of our projects were put on pause since, 90% of our work is government work. And I had the time, I said, okay, it's time to start figuring this out. And we finessed it and we kept on improving upon it. And we figured out, how to make it, create it to be scalable, but also we designed it to be modular. So I'm really glad that you spoke about things hanging off of drones, because we realized that Nixie could collect water samples. We also could have water probes and sensors in the Nixie compartment that we could use to collect the data. But also we designed it so that we could take off the bottom water sampling compartment and we could create other attachments for it. So we are creating a compartment so you can do short run delivery.
Wow.
With it as well. So that's like the next phase. But we're creating a multi-tool. But the water sampling is really, what we're focused on right now.
Sure. So and that, I love that story. The eavesdropping thing, it's not really eavesdropping if you are just actively listening. Active listening is a lost art, I'd say. I'm definitely trying to teach, students and kids more about active listening. And the more you can hear, selling and just being a good consultant and a good friend, a good partner, good anything is just about listening. So I think that's really important. It's a good little lesson, bing, listen to people when they're talking about a need, and if you can actually fill that need, then that's even better. So I understand the work you're doing. I want to dive a little bit more on the water side. The water sampling itself. So I understand that Nixie has sort of two levels. You have like the basic and the advanced. I mean, advanced is sort of coming soon. And then you already hinted to sort of a next level project on the delivery side, which, bravo. There's, if anything besides flying cars, drone delivery is starting to literally take off. Good. Like, that's just one of the things that I see.
We're only allowed 5 puns per podcast.
Negative. That's not true. So if we dive more on the water side, and then I want to talk about the data side, because that's where I love to always touch on the data side, because I love that part. On the water collection side, is it all types? So is all types of waterways? Dive just a little bit on the use case. So it's not just diving into, your local stream, but I mean, we're talking about, mining, nuclear, like all of these other industries, these industrial water use cases that sampling is still required. I want to dive into that to talk about the requirement a little bit more. Yeah,
it's really interesting. So, so you have the Clean Water Act. So all industries that have some interaction with water have to comply under the Clean Water Act. And that means industries are utilities and mining and, of course, water, but also, agriculture. And, of course, there's emergency management after there's major storm events, hurricanes. And also, if you look at California, when there was all the fires, and the foam that is used to put out the fires has a carcinogen in it called PFAS. And if that material gets in the water supply, that's a big concern. We expect that Nixie will be used a lot in California to start testing for that material in particular. So, and of course you have the reservoirs and you have the streams, and you also have the places. To be honest, Nixie was also developed to be kind of a rogue invention, a rogue device, so that if people wanted to check out the water in their neighborhood, that the drone operators, they could just fly and pick it up. And I know, we're not supposed to, we're not calling for rogue operators, but it can be used that way. And we like that flexibility. We like the fact that, take this into your own hands. You could bring it to the sampling station. Now, with the advanced sensor, which is not out yet, this is interesting. So basically, we're able to put on many different types of probes into this sensor bundle package. And it depends on the customer needs. So in oil and gas, they're testing for certain materials, mining, other materials, water, other materials. And so you don't necessarily need every single sensor. So we're able to create these custom bundles. It just has to dip in the water 1 to 2 seconds, and it automatically collects the data in the Nixie app. So you have all the water data, and you're able to, you don't have to come back to home to take a water sample out. You just continuously dip and then dip and then dip, because you just need 1 to 2 seconds submerged. And this is going to be not a direct sales model, but this is going to be a subscription-based model based on the amount of dips you do in a year. So it's going to be like a leasing program. And This is a way we can offset the costs to the client, whether it's a drone operator or it's another client.
There's 2 different directions I want to go.
Okay.
First direction, and because I'm interested, 3 different directions. Wow, this is great. There's so many questions I want to ask. First one that I want to ask about. So you chose to work with very popular DJI commercial sort of industrial drones, the M600 and the M300 RTK. Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Why you didn't go with maybe some other type of drone, and why DJI?
Well, I don't mind, let's talk about who are the other drone companies and who has them. And that was one of the things we looked into. And Nixie can be adapted for any heavy lift that can handle the payload and the water current. Okay. So right now for the M600, the Nixie with the 500 milliliter bottle can work up to 500 knots of current, which is pretty strong current. But when we looked at all of the potential clients, they were using DJI products. So that's really what made the decision for us. But again, we're able to work with any drone company, and we're very happy to modify it for American drone company. Sure. It's just that that's not what our clients had.
Totally makes sense. And no, obviously you use what sort of because everyone knows they're the 800-pound gorilla in the industry as far as what's out there on the commercial industrial side and on the prosumer consumer side as well. There are other drone companies that obviously it would make sense to also offer an adaptable kit for, but start with the big guy. Totally respect that. Totally get it. My next question is related to the service model a little bit. So obviously I have a lot of drone service providers and drone pilots and individual operators that watch the show. The thing that I am also trying to understand, I want to dive deeper into the leasing service model, but I'm going to add on a question to it. One that maybe you've thought of, maybe you haven't. One that I thought would be very interesting is how these drone service providers and operators, independents, work with Nixie Dip, work with Rainmaker. I understand that there is, I guess the question, are you planning on perhaps doing like a centralized repository, centralized client base, and essentially just looking for operators that are leasing your system, using your centralized platform, your data platform? We'll talk about the data platform in a little bit, but essentially you're bringing on the business, right? Like you're working with the DEP, you're working with all of these larger customers, and the independent drone provider, most of them aren't. They don't have those relationships. They haven't worked in that realm before, but this is an opportunity to expand the industrial reach of drone operations by using like a decentralized performance model. So I would love to just get your thoughts on that, because it seems to be a very popular thing right now.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. So one of the things we want to do is create a device that was going to make other drone operators money, because that was the device we felt would be successful if it actually created another revenue stream for drone operators. And we think that water is one of those areas that it's not being paid attention to. Now it's starting to, because of UN sustainability and all of that. And it's going to become a bigger and bigger deal. So the thing is, so we have experience working with the government, and it's a very steep learning curve. And we've been asked this: would we be the data collectors or the water sample collectors, or would it be other people? We want everybody to do it. We will do it, as well. That's but we would actually encourage our colleagues in New York. We're not looking to compete with them with this. We'd rather them buy Nixie and them use it. So in terms of the data, the central depository, yes. We are looking to collect all of the water data from all around the world using the Nixie sensors. And yes, that's one of the people on our, one of our advisors is the executive director of WSmart, which is a water security NGO that was formed after 9/11. The DEP actually organized it, and it includes all of the largest water utilities from Europe, Israel, and the United States. And we will work with WSmart to, once we collect the data, to, further the analytics and bring in some AI and really try to find out and predict where the water issues are going to be happening after like a storm event is here or a man-made attack is there. We can sort of figure out what that means for the water going over there. Do you know what I mean? So basically a modeling analysis of water. And so since Nixie can be, the data is always going to be going to a centralized location, that it's going to be a very valuable tool, I think, for everybody, governments.
So with the more advanced model, or perhaps it would make sense that sort of like possibly even real-time data transmission would be potentially possible with 4G technology. Is that something like, is this going to be a 4G like enabled technology, or is it still going to require pull a card, upload? How does that supposed to work? And then I want to dive a little deeper into the overall data.
It's going to be real time. We're actually going to be automatically collecting data directly from the sensor, and via Bluetooth. So that's how it's going to transmit to the app. Yeah. So we're trying to streamline everything to make it as easy as possible, but also for the chain of custody. So that we want to minimize any human error, because whenever there's an error, it's usually a human error. So we're trying to automate as much as possible, and make it as easy as possible, streamline it, and that way the data will be good data, because the only thing worse than no data is bad data. You know what I mean? Like that's where the real problem comes.
That makes sense. Is there any sort of like calibration that needs to happen beforehand?
Yeah.
Like how, I'll ask so how advanced do these pilots need to be? Like, is it just kind of answer that question? I'm curious.
Well, yeah, if they're used to flying an M600 or an M300, if they're competent, I wouldn't say maybe a new user, if they get like 6 months under their belt with the system, they should be very confident in using the system for this, because they are flying in water essentially. So we're going to build, right now we're working on a particular sensor that's going to stop the drone going in too far to the water. Right now, Nixie is 1 meter long. That's because the water samples, the physical water samples, need to be ideally taken below 1 foot to 2 feet under the water. You don't want to collect the very top surface water because there's a lot of floatables that come up, and that's not indicative of the actual water body. So anyway, so those are some of the things we're trying to streamline further right now to try to, again, make it as foolproof as possible, because everyone makes mistakes, right? So you have to assume that mistakes are going to happen. So how do you protect the drone? How do you protect the pilot, etc.?
Makes sense. How to protect the water body, all of those, because it's a whole different problem. Now the drone's in the water.
Yeah. You don't want to, for lots of different reasons. You don't want
lots of reasons for sure. Yeah. So on the data side, can you describe for the listeners, so what on the data side is unique? What is it doing for the customer? What value is it doing? What data is it crunching it? How is it doing that? Just talk a little bit of how that workflow is on the data side once it's collected. So
the way it's working is you have teams. So the data is not shared between different entities. Every entity is protected, and the teams can put on anyone they want within their teams to automatically get the data. So if the drone dips in and there's a certain material that exceeds the allowable thresholds, then an alert will automatically be sent out to that team saying this material exceeds, and that will allow them to react immediately to that site and see what's going on. And that is a major development, because right now, what they do is they have to go out on boats and usually then transfer to smaller boats and a water sampling team on those boats. And you also need a captain, and there's a lot of equipment and boats and people involved. And then they have to physically collect a sample, and then they have to bring it back to the lab. And then they have to wait 1 to 5 days for the results. And then they find out if there's a problem. So, you know what I mean? So it's it just saves all that time. It just makes it so much more efficient. So if there's a problem where, again, if it's a natural problem or a man-made issue with illegal dumping or just whatever, then they'll know immediately and they can mitigate it.
Makes sense. Yeah, I saw on the website something about a 70% gain in efficiency.
Yeah, well, because so what we did is we looked at the data from the DEP and we saw the maximum amount of samples they were able to collect in a day, and then we went at the same site, so we were able to collect 4 times as many samples in that same time period. And that's how we were able to figure that part out. So obviously, in New York City, the way it works is you're sampling along the coastline where any outfalls, the water coming from the land into the water. So you could be sampling every 20 feet or something from each other. That's what happens in New York City. But in other areas, there might be, sampling points might be further away from each other. So it all depends on the distance between each sampling point.
Yeah.
But,
So on the data validation side, so I'm assuming that the data processing for the water samples is well established. Those processes and workflows are well established. The the sensors that are being put on the advanced, have they been through the same data validation process and they're the same sensors?
Yeah. So actually, we're working with, so we did not invent the probes and sensors. We're working with a company out of the UK called Proteus Instruments, and their sensors have already been working in the world, in the UK, in Asia, in the US. They're having a little trouble getting into the US market because it's a new way of doing things. But their sensors just sort of sit in the water for 2 years, and it automatically, in like the same place more or less, and it just constantly collects water samples. You know, and that's great. It's amazing, but because we are able to take their sensors and retrofit them on the Nixie, we're able to be mobile with their sensors. So their data has already been proven out, and they're already successful. They're a new company, newish in the world of water, right? But they're having a lot of success in Asia. And we think that's going to be the biggest market is Asia Pacific.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was going to ask about that, about so it's good transition. I'm curious, what does the future of Nixie look like? You already hinted that it's going to be sort of an adaptable platform, possibly for more maybe US made systems, but also with other adaptations to make it more of a multi-tool, which is a great idea, by the way. Nice. Where do you see this sort of going after that? Like, do you see other potential markets for this? What is the future? What are the implications on both the water regulations and drone regulations potentially on this use case? Since the interesting thing is, since it's over water, yeah, people don't live in water. People don't typically drive on water.
Right. Yeah. Yes. We are hoping at a certain point to get a, BEV loss, BB loss at a certain point, because if we're only flying over water, so that's one, but we'll see how that goes, in terms of what this means for the larger industry. Government is really slow moving, but we have already started the process, and we are involved in projects where the EPA in the United States will be made aware once we get a certain amount of results in, data points in, that can be validated. It's going to take a long time, but our goal is to really show the Fed that there is another way to do this, and not to say that there is a benefit for being a person that goes out in the field and collects a water sample, because they can look around and see if there is anything else going on. So it's not going to completely replace a human water sampler, but it will certainly supplement it quite a bit, and it will make it more efficient. And you will not need as many human samplers, in my opinion, at all. Okay, so it will take a long time for us to prove out to the EPA. That's okay. We're in it for the long haul. We'll get it. We'll get there. In terms of like the world, what's really important about Nixie and this mobile sensor with water is just having all of the water in a centralized database where you can, because water is fluid. So just because an event happens in this country, it means that the surrounding countries are going to be affected sometimes by this. This is happening all the time. So it's very important for the world, and there's already organizations that are working on this in the world, so that we could share the data, so that we can help manage, water manage, basically. So it has huge implications, especially towards the future, because water is already being traded on, future exchanges, and clean water is going to be much more difficult to in the future for the availability. And we see that in our country as well. We see this in California. We see this in Florida. And we have in Texas, we just had a problem. So yeah. And, and in our country, we probably has some the cleaner standards compared to many places in the world. So, but Asia Pacific's going to be a big one, we think. I did want to kind of hop back to something.
Yeah, go for it.
That, we're very much like a grassroots company that's coming from the bottom up from the drone world. And we're very connected to, our drone colleagues. And what's going to be very important for us is to get feedback from all of our friends and all of our colleagues in this industry. And we're going to be learning from them. And they're going to say, hey, would you be, could you change it a little bit? Could you adjust this device a little bit, or could you create this attachment instead? And we're looking for a lot of feedback because we really want to, again, we're a grassroots company, and we think the real true innovation in this industry is the grassroots. It's coming from grassroots. It's not top down. It doesn't come from the large companies. It comes from below. Absolutely. 100% agree with that. And I think that's a great way to end this interview. These concepts are absolutely fascinating to me. And the fact that Rainmaker has really taken the reins, there you go, there had to be one, on actually developing a technology that is able to meet sort of UN sustainability goals, water regulation, and also be usable for massive data mining efforts, collaboration, and that kind of lends itself to the collaboration with the industry itself, the drone industry, and all of the engineering, industrial mining, all of the use cases for this, everything sort of working together. So I see this as a huge opportunity to continue to come together as an industry to fully test, validate, brainstorm, honestly, on what these use cases can be, because I'm willing to bet as we start to get it out there, more and more individuals will come up with new ideas. Oh yeah. And so what I'm going to do is down in the description, I'll definitely leave contact information, websites. You've seen some videos already in this podcast. You're going to see some other ones as well. There's going to be some really fantastic things going forward. And Jes, I just want to thank you so much for your time this morning. No, thank you for inviting me. You're welcome. Great speaking. I love talking to innovators. It just, the mindset is... Well, this industry is so interesting, right? Like this industry, there's so much that has not been developed still. There's so much that can be. I mean, it's really, this is an industry of like makers and doers, right? It really is. That's kind of fun. Yeah. It was fun. Thanks again, Jason. Well, I had fun on this interview, and let's do this. So thank you so much for listening. This is another episode of Do You Know Drones Innovator interview with Jes Chosid, CEO of Rainmaker. We introduced Nixie Dip. I'm excited to see what happens next with Rainmaker and with Jes and with everything in this industry. There's always something new, always something exciting happening in this industry. Be sure to subscribe, click that notification bell. You're going to want to keep informed of everything that we're talking about here on the Do You Know Drones podcast. And until next time, have a great week, fly safe, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye now. 1, 2, 3. Thanks for watching Do You Know Drones.